Hey everybody! So today I'm talking about 6 things that reef hobbyists used to do, but today seem really strange. You know, reef keeping is not that old of a hobby. The first saltwater tanks began to become popular like in the late 60s, early 70s. So the thing people used to do that we definitely don't do anymore is to use tester fish on a new aquarium. Send forth the sacrificial damselfish. Back then, getting your nitrogen cycle to start was such a mythical thing. Like there was just so much mysticism about it. But it wasn't like you could today where you can just dump in a bottle of ammonia, dump in a bottle of bacteria. You had to do it the natural, slow way. And essentially, you would sacrifice this damselfish to the aquarium gods so that your fish tank might have life. However, more often than not, that damselfish that was supposed to die would survive. It is claimed that entire 90-gallon setup as its own territory. A lot of people remember, you know, having to tear down their whole like rock work to catch that 1-inch fish. I, however, learned a technique to train the damselfish to swim into the net. And I actually did a whole video about it. You should check it out. It's pretty interesting. They bought coral from furniture stores. This was like back in the 70s and 80s. Saltwater fish came onto the market before live rock. So you could buy the fish, you could buy the salt, but you didn't really have anything you could put in the tank. There were no decorations. So what was an aquarist in the 1970s to do? A lot of furniture stores, they sell like little pieces of coral as like accent pieces. So what people would do, they would go all over town, go to every furniture store they could find, and they would buy all these dead coral skeleton accent pieces from these furniture stores and take all of those home, and that's how they would design their hardscape, with coral that they bought from furniture stores. The guy I first heard this story from is on reef.com. It's a really neat post because he talks about how, he couldn't find live rock and he was tired of buying it from the furniture stores, so he just learned to make his own. I put the link down below. You should check it out. It's a pretty cool post. Chillers. If you only began keeping reef tanks in like the past 10 years even, you probably don't know what a chiller is or why you would need one. It seems kind of counterintuitive. Before we had LEDs, there were 2 options for aquarium lighting. You had your T5 fluorescent bulbs, you had metal highlights, or, okay, there was a 3rd option, you could cut a hole in the roof. Now, with T5s you were fine, but there were a lot of corals you couldn't grow under T5s. They just weren't bright enough. You needed something brighter, which is where the metal highlights came in. Now, metal highlights were as bright and as hot as the sun. So you needed a piece of equipment to rebalance your tank. You needed a chiller to counteract the heat coming off of those metal highlights. I remember the first time I ever saw an LED lighting fixture. You guys gotta understand, like metal halide T5 systems, they were big. Like when I was at the fish store and I saw the first LED light fixture and the guy told me this, just this tiny little strip of lights was enough for this huge tank, I was like, man, you're making that up. And honestly, I kind of miss metal highlights. Like, metal highlights, they put like a really nice shimmer to the water that you just don't get with LED lighting. Under gravel filters. One of the types of filtration that has really fallen out of fashion within the past, really past 20 years. Like, even when I started reef keeping, nobody was really using these anymore. The way an under gravel filter works is it puts like, it's like irrigation ridging underneath your sand, and then you have these 2 towers that come up, and the pump pulls water up through the sand bed and then up to the top of your tank, and it creates a cycle like this. And what it does is it basically converts your sand bed into your filter media. And literally everyone, they move to hang on the back filters, canister filters, or just to regular old sumps. Except for one guy. There's this guy on reef.com named Paul B, and he has the coolest tank. He's had this thing for 47 years, and he's using an under gravel filter on it. It is a beautiful tank, and I just think it's so cool that 1, it's 47 years old, 2, he's running an under gravel filter on that thing. That is just fascinating. Crushed coral under the sand bed. Back in the day, people were so particular about how you did your sand bed. There was only one formula to follow to have a successful reef tank, and if you didn't do it this way, it would crash and burn. What literally everybody did was they did a layer of crushed coral, then a layer of sand. Everybody, and I don't know why, everybody was so paranoid that their pH would drop and crash the tank. Everybody was terrified of this, and the idea was that that crushed coral underneath the sand, and believe me, it had to be underneath the sand, you couldn't just mix them up, that crushed coral would balance out their pH if it began to drop. But then bare bottom tanks became a thing, and everybody realized, oh, you don't need to do that. Ocean harvested live rock. Now, this last one is still in the hobby, but it's just being phased out so quickly that I think in the next, 5 years is not going to be a thing anymore. Like, when people started suggesting the idea of just using dry rock and then adding your own bacteria, everybody was so suspicious of this. And I'll admit, I was too. The fact that you could put a dry, dead piece of rock and then just pour in a little bacteria from a bottle, man, that just sounded like witchcraft. And today, I feel like most new reefers, they don't use live rock. I feel like that's something that is just totally gonna phase out of the hobby. It's not really economically viable anymore. It is so much cheaper just to use dry rock. And there's really no benefits of using ocean harvested live rock anymore. You just don't need it. Now, for this setup, I did use live rock because live rock is still readily available in China. It's still really cheap. But honestly, this is probably going to be my last live rock setup. In my previous tank, on my old apartment, I'd used a piece of fake pre-molded rock, and I really liked it. I just couldn't find a piece that I liked for this aquarium size, so that was why I went with live rock. Just one more time, and for the nostalgia of it. Alright, well, thank you guys for watching. Let me know if you remember doing any of these things. Also, if you were a reef keeper between the 70s and the 80s, I want to talk to you because I'm making more videos like this to record the history of the hobby. So send me an email. You can get it on my contact page. I would really love to talk to you. So just send me an email. I'll give you a call. We can talk on Skype, whatever you want to do. All right. Well, thank you guys again. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time.